The government need to do, in your opinion? Do you think we need to recruit army, 100,000 visas? What's your position?
The army should have been called in last week because it takes some days for them to be mobilised. That needs to happen now if it's not already happened. We've got to recognise that actually it's hardly surprising that if you spend the last 4 years slagging off EU citizens, they may not want to come and help us out when it comes to these 5,000 visas the government's announced. They've got to resolve the issue of making it enticing for people to come. There's got to be golden handshakes to bring back those who have recently retired, because we need them. They've recently retired. We've also got to accelerate the training of people in the pipeline. There's actually a good reason why there's been a backlog of training because of the pandemic and people having to keep their social distance. All those things have got to happen. But also, when you look back at previous fuel crises, which weren't telegraphed, what the governments previously have done is to, for example, reserve fuel for those who definitely do need it. So the good news is our emergency services and TfL, we've got enough fuel, we've got enough reserves. What about the care worker? What about the black cab driver? What about the PHV driver? What about those that need their car to get to a hospital because of their nighttime workers? And so what the government should be doing is, if it's the case, which it is, there's a shortage of fuel, reserve the fuel we have for those that definitely need it.
Because that's an pertinent point, because back in 2000, there were notices issued actually under TfL headed note paper which gave certain carers, nurses, doctors, teachers, and indeed black cab drivers the ability to go to designated petrol stations. Now, is that something? But that was something that actually came from
It was a government initiative. I mean, the mayor was only formed in 2000 and TfL. So love Ken Livingstone and TfL as we do. They were only formed in 2000. It was the government who said, you know what, we've got to make sure.
But would you want that?
Absolutely.
Would you want that power?
Absolutely. We're speaking to the DfT about what we can do. Working with the government, by the way, we've got to work this out together. Yes, they're to blame for a lot of this, but we've got to work together to resolve this. And so what we want the government to do is to, look, we know for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a shortage of fuel. Right, and because people have
I mean, you must be privy to those meetings with senior industry leaders, the emergency services. What are the forecasts?
Well, the reality is, because the public hasn't got confidence in the government messaging, inverted commas, no fuel shortage, people who don't necessarily need to fill up their tank are doing so, and so that's compounding the problem. And so I think for the next few days, at least, there's going to be a shortage of fuel. My message to those who don't need the fuel is, please don't fill up your tank if you don't need to. Because think of the care worker looking after your mum and dad. Think of the hospital staff who need to get to hospital because the public transport doesn't serve their hospital. Think of the people who need the fuel. But I think for the next few days, we've got a big problem. That's why it's really important for the government to get a grip, but also to show they've got a grip. Look, how are you going to deter people from filling up their tank when they don't need it? When the answer is they're going to have confidence that the government's got a grip so they won't fill up their tank.
And where do you think that within a few days this will be resolved? Do you think it can be sorted out, or do you think it's going to go beyond?
The good news is, in 2000, which is the most comparable situation, the government sorted it pretty quickly. What we can't afford to happen is for this to drip, drip, drip as we go into autumn and winter. I'm really concerned that we simply aren't going to have non-British people wanting to apply for those visas, particularly from the EU, because if you think about it, there are jobs available in the European Union where they treat you better, where the government doesn't send out messages that gives the impression you're not welcome, whether it's fair or unfair, where the government's not been, frankly speaking, slagging you off for the last 4 or 5 years. So the government's got to try really hard in relation to making it attractive for those people we need. But I tell you this, it isn't just haulage. We've got a problem in hospitality, in culture, in construction. And that's why it's really important for the government to realise we need a proper plan. I mean, some of the things I've been talking about is a COVID recovery visa, because in construction, big problem, particularly a problem in culture, hospitality. We're going to be talking about making sure we make it enticing people to come, but also accelerate training up people in this city, in this country, to have the skills for the jobs we're creating.